Someone is lying to you right now. Not in this video, in your life. A colleague, a friend, maybe someone you trust, and you have no idea because they look completely normal. They say the right things, they make eye contact at the right moments, their story adds up on the surface. But underneath, in the signals your conscious mind is not trained to catch, the truth is leaking out constantly. Every human being broadcasts their real emotional state through dozens of simultaneous channels at every moment. Micro-expressions that last less than 1/5 of a second. Subtle shifts in vocal tone that happen before the words change. Postural adjustments that the body makes automatically when the mind is under stress. The gap between what someone says and what their nervous system is doing while they say it. Most people never learn to read these signals, not because they are not intelligent, but because nobody taught them and because the signals move fast. But here is what the research from behavioral psychology, FBI interrogation science, and decades of nonverbal communication study consistently shows. These signals are learnable. The ability to read people accurately is not a gift. It is a skill. And once you have it, you cannot unsee it. You will walk into rooms differently. You will have conversations differently. You will understand what is actually happening beneath the surface of every interaction while everyone else is still reacting to the performance. Stay with me through technique number 3. That is the one that changes how you listen forever. Not what you hear, how you listen. Most people have never been taught the difference. Technique number 1. Baseline mapping. The skill that makes everything else possible. Before you can read anyone, you need to understand something that most people skip entirely and then wonder why their people reading is unreliable. You cannot spot a deviation if you do not know what normal looks like for that specific person. This is called baseline mapping, and it is the foundational technique used by every serious behavioral analyst, from FBI negotiators to clinical psychologists to elite poker players. Every person has a set of default behaviors that are natural and relaxed for them specifically. The way they hold their body when they are comfortable, the speed at which they speak when there is no pressure on them, how often they make eye contact when the topic is neutral, the way they gesture or do not gesture, their resting facial expression, their default breathing pattern. These are their baseline. They are different for every person. An introverted person's baseline might include minimal eye contact, slower speech, and more stillness. An extroverted person might have constant movement, frequent gestures, and faster speech as their normal. If you do not establish baseline first, you will misread both of them. Here is how you baseline someone in real time. In the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation, before you bring up anything that matters, talk about something completely neutral. Not work if you are in a work context. Not the topic you actually want to discuss. Something genuinely low stakes. Their commute, the weather. A mutual, non-controversial experience. Watch everything during this window. How still or mobile are they? Are they making eye contact or looking slightly to the side? Are they breathing from the chest or the belly? Do they touch their face, their neck, their clothing? Where do their hands go when they are not in motion? You are not analyzing yet, you are just recording normal. Once you have that baseline locked in your mind, every deviation from it becomes meaningful data. Not proof of anything. Data. Something shifted. Something changed. That is the question. Now you find out why. Technique number 2. The freeze, flight, fight hierarchy. How the body tells the truth before the mouth decides to lie. Your nervous system has a threat response that is older than language. Older than conscious thought. When your brain perceives a threat, whether that threat is physical danger or a question you do not want to answer, it initiates a response sequence that begins in the oldest parts of the brain and works faster than your conscious mind can intercept. The freeze response is the first and most subtle. When something is said that triggers discomfort or a threat, the body briefly stills. Blinking slows. Movement stops. Even breathing pauses for a fraction of a second. Most people miss this because it is fast, and because we are culturally trained to focus on words rather than physicality. But if you are watching for it, that micro freeze, that sudden stillness in someone who was moving naturally a moment before, is one of the most reliable signals that something just landed that the person did not want to land. The flight response is what comes next if the discomfort continues. The body tries to create distance or escape. The person leans back subtly. Their feet, if visible, point toward the exit. They angle their torso away from you. They cover vulnerable areas, the neck, the stomach, with their hands or arms. They create barriers between themselves and the threat, crossing arms, placing objects on the table, pulling clothing closed. These are not conscious choices. They are ancient survival behaviors being executed by a nervous system that does not know the difference between a lion and an uncomfortable question. The fight response, which is the final stage and the most obvious, shows up as increased tension, louder or more clipped speech, forward lean, jaw tightening, fist formation, direct and aggressive eye contact. Here is how you use this in practice. When you ask a question or introduce a piece of information, watch the first 1 to 3 seconds of the physical response before the verbal response. The body answers before the mouth does. And the body does not have a script. Technique number 3, vocal truth detection. The channel most people are completely deaf to. This is the one that changes how you listen, not what you hear, how. Most people listen to the content of what someone says, the words, the logic, the story. And skilled liars know this, which is why they put enormous effort into making the content of their words airtight. But they cannot control everything simultaneously. And the channel they most consistently fail to control is vocal, not what they say, how they say it. The voice is a direct output of the autonomic nervous system. When someone is under stress, their throat tightens, their breathing changes, their vocal cords tighten or relax in ways that alter pitch, speed, rhythm, and resonance. Here is what to listen for. Pitch elevation. When stress increases, the laryngeal muscles tighten and pitch rises. This is why people sound slightly higher than normal when they are nervous or lying. The change is often small, half a step, sometimes less. But it is consistent and involuntary. Against their baseline, you can hear it. Speech rate changes. Under stress, people often speak faster as the cognitive load of managing a story increases, and the desire to get past the dangerous territory intensifies. But sometimes the opposite happens. Speech slows and becomes overly deliberate when someone is carefully constructing each sentence rather than speaking naturally from memory. Throat clearing and swallowing. Stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, which reduces saliva production and causes the throat to tighten. People under stress swallow more frequently and clear their throat more often than baseline. When this increases sharply right after a specific question or piece of information, it is the body signaling elevated autonomic activation in that moment. Non-answer answers. Listen for the structural response, not just the content. Truthful people, when asked a direct question, generally answer the direct question first and then elaborate. People who are managing a deception often respond to the category of the question rather than the question itself. They answer adjacently. They reframe. Here's the critical point on all of this. None of these signals in isolation means anything definitive. A person clearing their throat might have allergies. A person speaking fast might just be naturally fast. The technique is not to identify individual signals and draw conclusions. It is to notice clusters, multiple signals from multiple channels, all shifting in the same direction, at the same moment, in response to the same stimulus. When the freeze happens, the vocal pitch elevates, the speech rate changes, and throat clearing appears, all in the first 3 seconds after the same specific question. That cluster is meaningful. One signal is a data point. A cluster is a pattern. Technique number 4, the strategic question architecture. How you ask determines what leaks out. Most people think reading someone is passive. You watch, you listen, you pick up signals. But the best behavioral analysts are not passive. They are architects. They design the conversation to create specific conditions that make the truth visible. Here is the principle. The brain processes different types of questions using different neural pathways. A question that requires genuine memory recall activates episodic memory systems. The person's eyes often move up and to one side as they access visual memory, or they pause and look slightly unfocused as they reconstruct the experience. A question that requires someone to construct or maintain a fabricated narrative activates working memory and executive function simultaneously, which is cognitively expensive. The person has to remember the lie, stay consistent with what they have already said, anticipate where the conversation is going, and generate plausible new content all at once. Here is the practical technique. Ask easy, low-stakes questions about real events to watch how the person accesses genuine memory. Watch their eyes, their facial movements, their speech fluency. This is your memory access baseline. Then ask the question that matters, not aggressively, neutrally, and compare. Are they accessing information the same way? Is the cognitive load the same, or did something change? Did they become more still, where movement usually accompanies genuine recall? Did their speech become too fluent, too rehearsed sounding compared to the natural roughness of true memory. Another powerful question architecture technique is the out-of-sequence question. Someone who is telling a true story can answer questions about it from any point in the timeline. They can start in the middle, go backward, jump to the end. Because true memories are stored as experiences you can navigate from multiple entry points. Someone reciting a constructed account has usually memorized it in sequence. Ask them to recount events backward or jump to a specific detail in the middle of the sequence and watch the processing cost spike. The hesitation, the restart, the need to go back to the beginning of the sequence, that is not how memory works. That is how recitation works. Technique number 5, leakage detection. What the body says when the face is performing. Paul Ekman, the psychologist whose decades of research on facial expressions became the foundation for an entire field of behavioral analysis, identified something he called emotional leakage. The phenomenon where genuine emotion escapes through one channel of expression even as another channel is actively suppressing it. The most common form is the micro-expression, a genuine emotional expression that flashes across the face in less than 1/5 of a second before the controlled expression takes over. Contempt appears for a fraction of a second before the polite smile. Fear crosses the face before the confident response begins. Disgust flickers before the neutral acknowledgement. These happen too fast for most people to consciously register. But with training, they become visible. You cannot learn to see micro-expressions from a description. You have to train your attention to move at a different speed than it normally does in conversation. But here's what you can do immediately without specialized training. Focus on the area around the eyes specifically. The upper face, the forehead, the brow, the muscles around the eyes is far harder to consciously control than the lower face. Genuine emotions show up symmetrically and involve the full face, particularly the orbicularis oculi muscles around the eyes, the muscles that create the crow's feet when someone genuinely smiles. A genuine smile involves both the mouth and the eyes. A social performance smile often involves only the mouth. Beyond micro-expressions, leakage happens in other channels simultaneously. The foot tap that continues despite the calm face, the single shoulder shrug that appears while the voice is delivering a confident statement, the nostril flare that precedes the measured response. These are leakage points. They are not caught by listening. They are caught by watching. And most people in conversation are so busy preparing their next sentence that they are not watching at all. That is the fundamental difference between someone who can read people and someone who cannot. It is not intelligence. It is attention. Specifically, it is the decision to give more attention to what you are observing than to what you are planning to say next. Which means the first step in becoming someone who can read anyone is learning to be more comfortable with silence in your own head. To listen without the constant internal monologue of your own response preparation running at full volume. When you quiet that internal noise, the signals other people are broadcasting become dramatically louder, and once you hear them, you realize they were always there. You were just too busy talking, even inside your own mind, to notice. Drop in the comments the situation where you most wish you could read people accurately. A workplace? A relationship? A negotiation? Tell me. I read everything. And if you know someone who has been burned by trusting the wrong person, send this to them. Because the people who understand human behavior are not the ones who manipulate others. They are the ones who stop being manipulated.